My suffering didn't undo what I did. My death wouldn't bring back what I destroyed. My rebirth isn't a blessing or a reward. It is merely penance and a last chance to make amends. To unshatter a mirror. The Iron Orchid's return. Chapter 1. The Hollow Victory. The smell of the ocean was wrong. Rather than salt and brine, it smelled like copper and burning meat. I lay on the shore of the artificial island, the black sand sticking to my wet armor. My breath came in ragged, painful gasps. The alien facility, a grotesque citadel of pulsing flesh and metal, was burning behind us. We had done it. We had completed the suicide mission. Magna was safe, for now. The leadership would be pleased. The propaganda machine would spin this into a legendary victory. But I felt nothing but a cold, hollow void in my chest. "David!" I croaked, trying to push myself up. My gauntlets were heavy, weighed down by the blood of 1,000 enemies and the guilt of one specific crime. He was standing a few meters away, facing the churning, dark waves, no longer wearing the exoskeleton. The 8 terrifying mechanical arms that had once torn through concrete and steel and through my own defenses were gone, discarded somewhere in the burning wreckage. He looked small again. He looked like the David I used to know, the naive boy who brought me coffee and blushed when I sharpened my sword. But the posture was wrong. His shoulders were slumped with a total resignation of the soul. "David," I said again, louder this time. I needed him to look at me. I needed him to yell, to scream, to activate those mechanical horrors and finish what he had started in the collapsed building back in the city. I needed punishment. He didn't turn. We can go back," I stammered. The great knight of Magna reduced to a begging child. "I can fix this. I can testify. I can tell them everything. I'll clear Andrea's name. I'll tell them I was the monster, not you." At the mention of her name, his shoulders tensed, just a fraction. He stepped toward the water. "David, please." I tried to stand, but my legs failed me. I crawled, my fingers digging into the wet ash. "Don't leave me here with this. Kill me, forgive me, but don't just walk away." He stopped. For a heartbreaking second, he turned his head. I saw his profile. He was pale, gaunt, his eyes hollowed out by a grief so profound it looked like madness. There was no anger there anymore. The rage that had fueled his transformation into that mechanical demon had burned out, leaving only ash. He didn't speak. He never spoke anymore. Not since the trial. Not since I killed her. He turned back to the horizon, to the endless gray ocean that separated us from home, and began to walk, instead of the extraction point. He walked along the shoreline, fading into the toxic mist rising from the water. He was leaving me alive. That was his cruelty. He was leaving me to live with the memory of what I had done, of Andrea's surprised eyes when my blade pierced her heart. He was leaving me with the memory of his own screams that day, the sound of his mind shattering. "David!" I screamed, my voice tearing my throat. The mist swallowed him. I was alone, the hero of Magna, the woman who murdered her best friend because she was too stupid to see a trap and too angry to ask questions. I curled into a ball on the alien sand, the victorious fire crackling behind me like laughter. If I had just listened, I thought, the darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision, if I had just stopped to think, if I could just go back. The world went black. Chapter 2. The Sunlight of the Past. "General? General Camilla?" The voice was annoying. It was buzzing in my ear like a persistent fly. I swatted at it, expecting to hit the damp sand of the alien island, but my hand hit something hard and smooth. Wood. Whoa! Easy, Camilla. You've been out cold. My eyes snapped open. The beach was gone. And I wasn't in the damp, facing cells of the prison block. I was in a room bathed in warm, golden sunlight. The air smelled of sterile cleaner and coffee. I bolted upright, gasping for air. My hand instinctively went to my hip for my sword, but I was wearing a standard-issue casual uniform, not my armor. Hey, breathe. A hand touched my shoulder. I grabbed the wrist. Who are you? I snarled, adrenaline flooding my system. Where is David? Where? I froze. In front of me, eyes wide with shock, behind thick-rimmed glasses, was David. But not my David. Not the gaunt, silent ghost from the beach. Not the hooded, mechanical reaper who had broken my ribs in the ruins of the hospital. This was David from before. His cheeks were flushed with color. His eyes were bright, full of panic and confusion, not dead emptiness. He was wearing his lab coat, a coffee stain on the lapel. He looked healthy, whole. David? I whispered, my grip loosening. Ow, he squeaked. Camilla, are you okay? You fell asleep during the briefing prep. You were having a nightmare. I let him go and stumbled back, my boots hitting the floor. I looked around. I was in the tactical office of the Central Defense Hub. The calendar on the wall displayed a date that made my blood run cold. Month of Janus, day 4. 3 weeks. I was 3 weeks in the past. It was 3 weeks before the aliens infiltrated the inner circle. 3 weeks before they killed my lieutenant, Dahlia, and planted the evidence to frame Andrea. 3 weeks before I drove my sword through Andrea's chest. Camilla? David rubbed his wrist, looking concerned rather than afraid. Do I need to call a medic? You look like you've seen a ghost. I stared at him. I wanted to weep. I wanted to fall to my knees and beg for his forgiveness for things he hadn't experienced yet. But I was a general. I was a warrior. And I had been given the one thing I begged for on that shoreline. A chance. I surged forward and wrapped my arms around him. I hugged him so hard I heard the air leave his lungs. Camilla? He stammered, his body stiffening. I was never this affectionate. I was the Iron Maiden of Magna. Good morning to you too? I buried my face in his neck, smelling the scent of machine oil and cheap soap. It was the best smell in the world. You're alive, I whispered. You're just you. I think so? David chuckled nervously. Did you think I was replaced by a synth or something? I pulled back, gripping his shoulders. I looked into those brown eyes, searching for any trace of the monster he would become. There was none. Just kindness. Just the boy who loved both me and Andrea, the boy whose heart I was destined to break if I didn't change everything. Where is she? I demanded. Who? Andrea? David adjusted his glasses. She's in Lab 4, running the diagnostics on the new barrier tech. She's been there all night. You know how she gets when? I didn't let him finish. I turned and sprinted out of the office. Camilla, wait. The meeting with the council starts in 10 minutes, David called out, running after me. Cancel it! I yelled over my shoulder. You can't cancel on the council. Watch me. I ran through the pristine white corridors of the defense hub. I ignored the salutes of the soldiers I passed. I needed to see her. I needed to confirm that this wasn't just a dying hallucination. I burst into Lab 4. The door slid open with a hiss. The room was filled with holographic displays and scattered mechanical parts. In the center of the chaos, typing furiously on a floating keyboard, was a woman with sharp features, messy dark hair tied up in a bun, and a lab coat that was too big for her. Andrea. She didn't look up. David, if you're bringing me more tea, put it on the safe table. If you're telling me to sleep, get out. I stood frozen in the doorway, my chest heaving. She was alive. She was arrogant, brilliant, sarcastic, and alive. Andrea, I choked out. She paused. Her fingers stopped moving. She spun her chair around, her eyebrows raised in surprise. Camilla? I thought you were busy terrifying the new recruits. She looked me up and down, noting my disheveled appearance and the wild look in my eyes. Her expression shifted from annoyance to concern instantly. She was the smartest person in Magna. She noticed everything. What's wrong? She stood up, walking toward me. Is it the wall? Is there a breach? I walked up to her. I towered over her, but she had never been afraid of me. She was the only person, besides David, who treated me like a human being instead of a weapon. No breach, I said, my voice trembling. I reached out and touched her face. Her skin was warm, real. Okay, you're freaking me out, Andrea said softly, though she didn't pull away. Did you hit your head during sparring? I took a deep breath, forcing the soldier back into control. I couldn't tell them I was from the future. They would think I was insane or compromised by an alien psychic attack. I had to play this smart. I had to be the strategist Andrea always told me I could be. I just realized how lucky we are to be here, together. David skidded into the room behind me, panting. I caught up. Whew. Camilla. Seriously. The council. I looked at the two of them. David, the heart. Andrea, the mind. And me, the sword. In the old timeline, the sword had destroyed the other two. Not this time. Screw the council, I said, a fierce grin spreading across my face. We're going to get lunch, the three of us. Andrea blinked. Lunch? It's 9 a.m. Breakfast, then, I declared. And then, you two are going to listen to me very carefully, because I had a premonition, and we have a lot of work to do. Chapter 3. The Setup. In the original timeline, the alien infiltrators, shapeshifters known as the Simulacra, had spent months sowing discord between the military me and the science division, Andrea. They whispered rumors that Andrea was selling tech to the enemy. They planted faulty equipment that caused soldier deaths and blamed it on her designs. They built a wall of mistrust so high that when Dahlia died, I believed the lie without hesitation. I sat across from them in the small cafeteria, watching them eat. David was happily munching on a bagel. Andrea was picking at her food, watching me with calculating eyes. Okay, Andrea said, putting down her fork. Spill it. You're acting weird. You're looking at us like we're about to vanish. I know about the leak in Sector 7, I said calmly. Andrea stiffened. That's classified. Even for you. How did you... I know that the faulty barrier generators weren't a design flaw, I continued, leaning in. They were sabotaged. Specifically, the coolant lines were cut from the inside. And I know that Colonel Argos has been accessing your encrypted files using a drive skimmer. David choked on his bagel. Argos? But he's the head of internal affairs. He's the nicest guy in the building. He's a simulacrum, I said flatly. In the old timeline, we didn't find out Argos was an alien until after I had killed Andrea. He was the one who handed me the proof of her treason. Andrea narrowed her eyes. That's a heavy accusation, Camilla. Do you have proof? No. I lied. I had memories, not physical proof yet, but I know where to get it. Tonight, Argos is going to meet a contact in the lower city to hand off the defense grid codes. We're going to be there." "We?" David squeaked. "I build robots, Camilla. I don't do covert ops." "You built the Spider Exo prototype, didn't you?" I asked. David froze. "How? I haven't shown that to anyone. It's in a locked vault in my basement. It's for search and rescue." "It's a masterpiece," I said, remembering how that machine had nearly torn me limb from limb. "And you're going to bring it, because we might need heavy lifting." I turned to Andrea. "And you're going to bring your EMP jammer, the portable one." Andrea looked at me, her mind racing. She was weighing the probability of me being crazy against the specificity of my knowledge. "If you're wrong," Andrea said slowly, "we'll be court-martialed for stalking a superior officer." "If I'm right," I countered, "we save the city, and we stop a traitor." I reached across the table and covered Andrea's hand with mine. "Trust me, please." She looked at our hands, then up at my eyes. A flush crept up her neck. She looked at David, who was looking at my hand on hers, with a mix of jealousy and confusion. "Fine," Andrea sighed. "But if we get arrested, I'm blaming David." Hey, Chapter 4, The Spider and the Night. The lower city was a labyrinth of neon lights and rain-slicked concrete. It was the underbelly of Magna, where the wall's shadow was longest. We crouched on a rooftop overlooking an abandoned warehouse. The rain was pouring down, masking our heat signatures. "This is insane," David whispered. He was wearing the prototype exoskeleton. It wasn't the weaponized horror from my future. It was bright yellow, industrial safety colors, and bulky. The 8 mechanical arms were folded neatly against his back. He looked like a heavy construction worker, not a villain. "Quiet," I hissed. Below us, a figure in a hooded trench coat walked into the alley. It was Colonel Argos. A moment later, a second figure emerged from the shadows. This one was wrong. Its movements were too fluid, its limbs slightly too long. A simulacrum in its natural form, disguised only by a cloaking shimmer. "Holy," David breathed. "Record everything," I commanded Andrea. Andrea was already on it, her visor down, capturing the exchange. "He's handing over a data drive. Audio confirms. Defense frequencies." "My God, Camilla, you were right." "That's enough," I said, standing up. "Wait! We need to call backup!" David hissed. "No," I said, drawing my sword. The blade hummed with energy. "We handle this. If we call it in, Argos might have allies who intercept the call. We take them down now." I leaped from the roof. The fall was 50 feet. I used my gravity boots to cushion the impact, landing in a crouch right between Argos and the alien. "Evening, gentlemen," I said, straightening up. Argos spun around, his human face contorting into a snarl. "General Camilla, you're out of your jurisdiction, and you're out of your skin," I replied. The alien hissed and lunged at me. It moved faster than a human, its arm transforming into a bone blade. In the old timeline, this speed would have surprised me. But I had fought David. I had fought on the Flesh Island. I had fought for years in a war that stripped me of everything. I sidestepped the strike with lazy ease and brought the pommel of my sword down on the alien's skull. It crumbled, momentarily stunned. Argos pulled a plasma pistol. "You stupid bee." Thwip! A mechanical claw shot down from the roof, snatched the pistol out of Argos's hand, and crushed it into scrap metal. David dropped down behind me, the exoskeleton landing with a heavy thud. The yellow arms flared out, creating a protective wall around us. He looked terrified, but he stood his ground. "Don't touch her," David said, his voice shaking but firm. Argos roared, his skin rippling as he shed his human disguise, revealing the gray, slimy bulk of a warrior-caste simulacrum. He grew to 8 feet tall, towering over David. "David! Left flank!" I shouted. On it! David yelled. Two of his mechanical arms shot out, grabbing a dumpster and hurling it at the monster. The simulacrum smashed the dumpster aside, but it gave me the opening. I surged forward, sliding under its guard. My sword flashed upwards, severing the nerve cluster in its leg. It howled and fell. "Andrea, now!" I screamed. Andrea dropped from the fire escape, landing gracefully. She slammed a device onto the wet pavement, the EMP jammer. A pulse of blue light exploded outward. The simulacrum shrieked as its cloaking tech and internal bio-augmentations short-circuited. It collapsed into a convulsing heap. I stood over Argos, the tip of my sword at his throat. "It's over," I said cold. David walked up beside me, his mechanical arms retracting. He was breathing hard, his eyes wide with adrenaline. We did it?" "We did it," I said. I looked at him. This was the turning point. In another life, he used those arms to tear me apart. Tonight, he used them to save me. I holstered my sword and grabbed the collar of David's lab coat, pulling him down for a fierce kiss. It was impulsive. It was unprofessional. But I had died on a beach of black sand, regretting that I never did it. David froze, his arms flailing, the mechanical limbs twitching in confusion. Then he melted against me. I pulled back, breathless. David looked like his brain had just rebooted. "Wah! Wah!" he stammered. "Nice moves, Robo-Boy," Andrea said, stepping up beside us. She was smirking, but I saw the flash of hurt in her eyes. I didn't hesitate. I turned and grabbed Andrea, pulling her in too. I kissed her with the desperation of someone who had murdered her in another life and needed to taste the life in her now. Andrea stiffened, gasped, and then kissed me back with equal intensity, her hands tangling in my hair. I pulled back, holding them both by the napes of their necks. We stood in the rain, over the defeated alien spy. "I love you both," I said fiercely, "and I'm not letting anyone hurt either of you ever again." David and Andrea looked at each other, then at me. "Well," David said, a goofy grin spreading across his face, "that was certainly better than a staff meeting." Chapter 5. The Change in Trajectory. The exposure of Argos sent shockwaves through Magna. With the evidence Andrea decrypted from the drive, we rooted out 6 other spies in the upper echelon. The planned invasion, the one that would have breached the wall in 2 months, was thwarted before it even began. But I knew the timeline wasn't fully safe yet. The aliens were desperate. They would try the trigger event. They would try to kill Dahlia. Dahlia was my lieutenant, a fierce redhead with a laugh that could crack glass. In the old timeline, her death was the catalyst for my madness. 2 weeks after the alley fight, the alarm sounded. Sector 4, a breach. "This is it," I told them. "We were in the command center. This is the trap. Sector 4 is a decoy," Andrea said, looking at the screens. "The energy readings are too clean. It's a lure. They want to draw the elites away." I nodded. "They're going after the barracks. They're going after the off-duty officers." "Dahlia's in the barracks," David realized. "Gear up," I ordered. This time, we didn't go to Sector 4. We went straight to the barracks. When we arrived, the slaughter had just begun. A squad of assassin-class simulacra were moving through the halls. I saw her. Dahlia. She was cornered at the end of a hallway, holding off 2 aliens with a broken riot shield. She was bleeding. "Camilla!" she screamed. "David, bowling ball!" I shouted, coming through. David, now piloting a refined, combat-ready version of the exoskeleton, painted matte black and gold, per Andrea's suggestion, charged down the hall. He didn't use weapons. He used momentum. He curled the arms around him like a protective sphere and rolled, smashing into the aliens with the force of a wrecking ball. The aliens went flying. I sprinted past him, leaping over Dahlia. As the aliens scrambled to recover, I unleashed a flurry of strikes. I didn't fight with anger this time. I fought with precision. I was a surgeon, removing a cancer. Slice, parry, thrust. The two assassins fell. General? Dahlia slid down the wall, clutching her side. How did you know? I reached down and hauled her up, checking her wound. It was superficial. She was alive. Lucky guess, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I looked back. David was using his mechanical arms to create a barricade, shielding a group of terrified recruits. Andrea was behind him, dual-wielding plasma pistols. She insisted on field testing them, covering his flank. They were a team. We were a team. The tragedy was cancelled. Chapter 6. The Iron Orchid. 6 months later. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. With the spies gone and Andrea's technology advancing without sabotage, we pushed the aliens back from the wall. We were winning. I stood on the balcony of the new command spire, overlooking the city. It was a clear night. The stars were visible. Thinking deep thoughts, I turned. David and Andrea were there. They were holding hands. It had been a complicated 6 months. Navigating a triad relationship while running a war effort wasn't easy. There was jealousy, awkwardness, and arguments about who left wet towels on the bathroom floor. But there was also laughter. There was warmth in the bed. There was the feeling of being anchored. David had refined his exoskeleton. He called it the Guardian suit now. The public loved him. He wasn't the monster of the ruins. He was the shield of Magna. Andrea was the head of the science division, universally respected. And I was no longer just the weapon. I was thinking about the beach, I said softly. The beach? David asked, tilting his head. We haven't been to the beach. The coast is still a quarantine zone. A dream I had, I said, a long time ago. Andrea walked over and leaned against the railing next to me. She wore a silk dress, a stark contrast to her usual lab coat. Was it a bad dream? The worst, I admitted. I lost everything. No, I broke everything in it. David stepped up on my other side, wrapping one of his human arms around my waist. The mechanical arms of his suit, which he wore even for formal events now, he felt naked without them, hovered gently behind us, holding champagne flutes. Well? David smiled, his eyes crinkling. You're awake now. I looked at them. In the original timeline, I had begged for a chance to make things right. The universe had listened. I looked at David's back. In my memory, I saw him walking away into the mist, a broken, hollow shell. Now, he turned his back to me only to grab a drink from his mechanical claw. He turned back, smiling, offering the glass to me. To the future? He proposed. To the future, Andrea agreed, clinking her glass against his. I took the glass. The champagne bubbled, golden and bright. I thought about the man with the 8 arms who had tortured me in the ruins. I thought about the woman I had stabbed. I thought about the guilt that should have crushed me. But the guilt was fading, replaced by the warmth of their bodies against mine. I had cheated fate. I had stolen a happy ending from the jaws of a tragedy. I took a sip. It tasted like victory. Not the hollow victory of the alien island, but a real, sweet victory. To us, I said. And as I drank, I finally let the image of the dying girl on the black sand fade away. She was gone. I was Camilla, the Iron Orchid of Magna, and I had everything I ever wanted. And looking at David and Andrea, alive and safe and mine, I knew I had won the only war that mattered. So, Andrea said, breaking the moment with a smirk, David has a new idea for the mech arms. He wants to install a massage function. I choked on my champagne. He what? David blushed crimson. It has therapeutic applications for post-battle recovery. He wants to tickle us, Andrea whispered loudly. I do not. I laughed. I threw my head back and laughed until tears streamed down my face, as if, only for a moment, I had forgotten how to mourn. Do it, I told David, grabbing his lapel. Install it. Really? He beamed. Really. The city lights twinkled below us, a sea of stars reflecting the ones above. We were safe. We were together. And the future was wide open. Chapter 7. Shadows of the Simulacra. Happiness is suspicious. For a soldier, peace is just the deep breath before the ambush. Even with Argos gone and Dahlia saved, I couldn't relax. My knowledge of the future was becoming spotty. I had changed so much that the script I remembered was dissolving. The major beats, the invasion, the specific traitors were gone, but the enemy was adaptable. The Simulacra weren't just shapeshifters. They were a hive mind. They learned. If brute force failed, they used psychology. If infiltration failed, they used terror. 3 months after the barracks incident, the attacks on the wall stopped completely. It's too quiet, I said, pacing the floor of our shared apartment. It was a luxury apartment in the spire, a perk of being the triad of salvation, as the media called us. David was on the couch, tinkering with a drone the size of a hummingbird. Andrea was reading a physical book, her legs draped over David's lap. Maybe they gave up, David suggested hopefully. Maybe the EMP blast scared them off. They don't get scared, David, I said, stopping by the window. They regroup. In the old timeline, in my dream. They stopped attacking right before they unleashed the Behemoths. Andrea looked up. Behemoths? Bioengineered siege breakers, I explained. 50 feet tall, armor impervious to standard ballistics. They smash the gates, and the swarm pours in. We don't have anything that can penetrate that kind of armor, Andrea mused, her mind already working. Not unless we scale up the plasma output of the defense grid to 300%, which would melt the grid, David added. Exactly. Unless, Andrea sat up, her eyes lighting up. Unless we use the exoskeleton tech. David, your hydraulic pressure output is insane. If we combined that with a pile bunker mechanism. I could punch through them? David asked, his eyes going wide. Like a superhero? Like a can opener, I corrected. But we need to be ready. They'll come at the new moon. That's when the tide is highest. It masks their seismic approach. The new moon is in 4 days, David swallowed. Then we have 4 days to turn you into a Titan Slayer, I said. This was the beauty of the second chance. In the old life, the Behemoths breached the wall. Thousands died. We held them back only by sacrificing the outer district. This time, I wasn't going to give them an inch. The next 4 days were a blur of sparks, caffeine, and grinding metal. Andrea and David worked in a fugue state. They stripped the Guardian suit down and rebuilt it. They added heavy plating, upgraded the servos, and installed the pile bunkers, retractable tungsten spikes on the 2 upper mechanical arms, driven by explosive charges. I spent the time drilling the troops. I reorganized the defense protocols, moving the heavy artillery to the sections of the wall I knew were vulnerable. I ignored the complaints of the older generals. I had the political capital now, and I spent it ruthlessly. General Camilla, you're exposing the northern flank, General Holloway argued. The northern flank is a cliff face, I snapped. The Behemoths can't climb it. They'll come through the drain pipes in the south. Move the tanks. Now. He grumbled, but he obeyed. On the night of the new moon, the rain was torrential. I stood on the southern wall, the wind whipping my cape. David was beside me, encased in his new suit. It was massive now, a walking tank. The 8 arms twitched with anticipation. You okay? I asked, my voice barely audible over the storm. I'm terrified, David admitted, his voice coming through the comms. But I'm here. I won't let them touch you, I promised. You open the shell. I kill the meat inside. Romantic. Andrea's voice crackled in our ears. She was in the control tower, managing the grid. Here they come, I whispered. The ocean boiled. 3 massive shapes rose from the surf. They were nightmares made of gray flesh and chitin. The Behemoths. They roared, a sound that shook the very stones of the wall. Fire! I commanded. The artillery barrage lit up the night. Shells hammered the monsters, but as I predicted, they exploded harmlessly against the thick carapace. They're not stopping! A soldier screamed. David, I said calm. You're up. Deploying, David said. He leaped from the wall. He fired the jump jets, slowing his descent. He landed in the shallow water with a splash that rivaled the monsters. He looked tiny compared to them, an ant facing a boot. The lead behemoth roared and swung a massive claw. David didn't dodge. He caught it. 4 of his mechanical arms slammed upward, catching the descending limb. The ground cracked beneath him, but he held. The hydraulics whined, screaming against the tonnage. Now! I yelled, diving off the wall after him. David gritted his teeth. Piston! Punch! The 2 upper arms, the ones with the tungsten spikes, shot forward. Boom. The explosive charges fired. The spikes drove into the behemoth's chest plate. Chitin shattered. Green blood sprayed like a geyser. The monster shrieked and staggered back. I was already in the air. I used my grappling hook to latch onto David's shoulder, swinging around him like a pendulum. I launched myself into the hole David had made. I landed inside the open wound. The smell was atrocious. I didn't hesitate. I drove my energized sword deep into the pulsing purple organ in the center of the cavity. The behemoth shuddered and collapsed. I backflipped out, landing on David's shoulder. 1 down! David cheered. 2 to go! I shouted. Don't get cocky! The fight that followed was the stuff of legends. It was a dance of steel and death. David was the anvil, immovable and devastating. I was the hammer, fast and precise. Andrea was the eyes, calling out attacks before they happened, diverting power to David's shields exactly when he needed it. We slaughtered them. When the sun rose, 3 carcasses littered the beach. The wall stood untouched. Not a single soldier had died. I stood on top of the dead behemoth, covered in alien gore. David opened his cockpit, gasping for fresh air. The troops on the wall were cheering. They were chanting our names. Camilla! David! Andrea! I looked down at David. He looked up at me, his face smeared with grease, his eyes shining with adrenaline and pride. We did it, he breathed. This was the high. This was the drug. In the old timeline, this battle would have been a massacre. It would have been a desperate, clawing fight for survival. But with foreknowledge, with trust, and with the combined power of the 3 of us, it was a stomp. It was gratifying. Chapter 8. The Ghost of the Future. Peace brings its own problems, specifically boredom and reflection. A month after the behemoth battle, things were normal. Too normal. I found myself waking up at night, sweating, reaching for a sword that wasn't there. The trauma of the old timeline hadn't vanished just because the events had changed. The memories were still there. One night, I couldn't sleep. I got up and walked to the living room. David was there. He was sitting on the balcony, staring at the moon. He wasn't wearing the suit, but he had a blueprint on his lap. Can't sleep? He asked without turning. No, I said, sitting beside him. Me neither, He tapped the blueprint. I keep trying to design the next upgrade, but I don't know what we're fighting anymore. That's a good thing, David. Is it? He turned to me. His eyes were serious. Camilla, you know things. Impossible things. You knew about Argos. You knew about the ambush. You knew about the Behemoths' weak points. I froze. I hadn't told them the truth. Not the whole truth. David. I'm not stupid, he said softly. I'm the smartest engineer in Magna, second only to Andrea, and I know patterns. You changed, Camilla, overnight. You went from the strict, distant general to this, to us. He reached out and took my hand. His fingers were rough, scarred from his work. Did something happen? He asked. Did you lose us? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I looked at him. I could lie. I could say it was a psychic vision. I could say it was classified intel. But I was done with lies. The old Camilla lied to herself. The new Camilla had to be better. Yes, I whispered. I lost you both. David didn't pull away. He squeezed my hand tighter. How? The aliens, I said, tears pricking my eyes. They tricked me. They made me think Andrea was a traitor. They made me kill her. David inhaled sharply. And you, I continued, the dam breaking. You saw it. It broke you. You built the arms not to protect, but to kill. You hunted me down. You became a monster, David. A beautiful, terrifying monster. And it was all my fault. I told him everything. The fight in the ruins, the torture, the suicide mission, the beach. When I finished, silence stretched between us. I waited for him to pull away. I waited for the horror to cross his face. Who wants to sleep next to the woman who murdered their best friend in another life? David stood up. He walked to the railing. That explains the sudden hugging, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I'm sorry, I sobbed. I'm so sorry. David turned around. He walked back to me and knelt down. He took my face in his hands. You came back, he said firmly. You came back, he repeated. You lived through hell, and the first thing you did, the very first thing, was run to save us. You didn't run away. You didn't hide. You fixed it. I killed her, David. You saved her, he corrected. The Camilla in that timeline, she was a victim too. She was played, but you beat them. He leaned his forehead against mine. You are not that woman, he whispered, and I am not that monster. We are here. We are now. I'm afraid, I admitted. I'm afraid that one day I'll wake up and be back on that beach. Then I'll build a boat, David said. And I'll come get you. I laughed, a wet, choked sound. You're ridiculous. I'm serious, he said. No one gets left behind. Not anymore. The door to the bedroom slid open. Andrea stood there, rubbing her eyes. She looked rumpled and sleepy. Why is everyone crying on the balcony? She yawned. Is the world ending again? David looked at me, then at Andrea. He smiled. No, just catching up. Andrea walked over and plopped down on my other side, leaning her head on my shoulder. Well, catch up quieter. I have a meeting at 0700. She closed her eyes, instantly drifting back to sleep. I sat there, sandwiched between the two people I loved most in the universe. The engineer and the scientist, the heart and the mind, and me, the shield. I looked at the blueprint on David's lap. It wasn't a weapon. It was a design for a prosthetics clinic, civilian application, the note said, for victims of the war. I closed my eyes. The The smell of burning meat and copper was gone. All I could smell was the ocean breeze and the scent of jasmine from Andrea's shampoo. The timeline was healed. The scar remained, but scars are just proof that you survived. Epilogue. The Garden of Iron. 2 years later. The war ended not with a bang, but with a treaty. Once we broke their behemoths and exposed their leadership, the Simulacra realized Magna was too costly to conquer. They retreated to the dark side of the planet. An uneasy truce, but a truce nonetheless. I retired from active duty. I was still a general, but I spent more time in the academy than on the wall. I taught tactics. I taught the new recruits to question orders, to trust their instincts, and to never, ever assume their friends were traitors. I stood in the garden of our home. It was a real house now, just outside the city limits, where the reclamation projects were turning the wasteland green again. David was in the yard, using the exoskeleton to uproot a dead tree stump. The Guardian suit had been retired from combat, stripped of its armor, and painted a cheerful blue. He used it for heavy landscaping now. Andrea was on the porch, nursing a baby. Our baby. Biological science had come a long way in Magna, thanks to Andrea. I walked over to them. The baby, a little girl named Dahlia, was asleep. She had David's nose and my eyes. "She's out," Andrea whispered. "Finally." "David's making a racket," I noted, watching him wrestle with the stump. "He's having fun," Andrea smiled. "He likes feeling useful." I watched him. The mechanical arms moved with fluid grace, an extension of his will. He laughed as the stump finally gave way, tossing it onto a pile of wood. He saw me watching and waved. One of the mechanical claws waved too. I waved back. This was it. It was the boring, mundane, beautiful Tuesday afternoon. It was the lack of fear. It was the knowledge that when I went to sleep tonight, I would wake up in the same bed, with the same people. I walked down the steps and into the grass. David powered down the suit and stepped out of it. He wiped sweat from his forehead. "Stump's gone," he announced proudly. "Good job, hero," I said, kissing his cheek. "What's for dinner?" he asked. "Andrea ordered pizza," I said. "Yes!" He pumped a fist. We walked back to the house together, hand in hand. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass. But the shadows weren't scary anymore. They were just shadows. I paused at the door and looked back at the blue exoskeleton standing silent in the garden. It looked like a statue of a guardian angel. "Coming?" David asked, holding the door open. "Yeah," I said, turning away from the past. "I'm coming home." The door closed. The lock clicked. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, Camilla was truly, finally, safe. The end.
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.